Okay, how goes it, guys? I'm sure you've seen the title. It is I, Austin Dean, aka Blade Nighttown, of the Blade Nighttown channel. And today, this is going to be like, I don't know, a podcast type video. Today we are going to talk about Avatar, The Last Airbender. Okay, stop that. For all you who don't speak dumbass, which I'm sure it's a lot of you, that means you're about to see me uncork my brain and rant and rave about the new live action Avatar The Last Airbender series. Because I figured, sure, your boy over here is quite the big fan of the animated series. I have not watched the live action movie that everybody is hates, abhors. Most people, anyway. Most people who haven't seen the animated series, that is, because I think anybody who's ever seen the animated series could not bring themselves to be like, yeah, this was a good movie. Because I have run into those factors where it's like someone who hasn't seen the TV show, the animated series anyway, who were like, yeah, who were like, yeah, no, that was a terrible movie. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of them out there, but there's someone currently in my house who has never seen the animated series, who will never see the animated series because cartoons. And she's like, I like the movie. You know, when I first met her, she has the earth and fire and air and water symbol tattoos on like her arm. And I was like, oh, so you like you're an Avatar fan? She's like, yeah, I love that movie. I'm like, oh, oh no, oh no. But yeah, let's get into it. Sorry, got itchy. Maybe it's the nerves. Maybe it's the nerves. I don't know. I'm back recording, hopefully for a decent amount of time now. Maybe a lot shorter breaks. Maybe even more consistency. Who knows? We'll find out. Anyways, yeah. So we'll start from episode one. I haven't seen like all 8 episodes, I think, that are out. I stopped at. I had to take a break from I don't know, episode, I want to say maybe six. I don't know. I don't recall the names of the episodes, but we'll start from the beginning, like any good, you know, I guess review, examination, whatever you want to call it. All right, so we start off already completely different from the original, and it opens up to a wide shot of Capital City, which I think they only really called that in Legend of Korra, but sure, why not? Give it a name. Cool. It's the Fire Nation capital, anyway, so I guess it makes sense. Capital City, sure. And you just see this random guy running through the streets, through the little buildings and whatnot, and we've got no idea who he is. All we know is he's got a scroll, which apparently is of some importance. And he's kind of just a nameless person to begin with, I'm pretty sure. I don't think we ever learned his name. But anyways, the Fire Nation are after him. There's a getaway. There's a guy with two ostrich horses, I believe they're called. Anyways, yeah, there's a guy with ostrich horses waiting for him, like his getaway driver. But he just tosses him the scroll, and he's like, "Go!" You know, you have to, basically like real Rogue Star Wars Rogue One feels, to where it's like, "Go! I'll The information is more important than my life, or what have you. And so get the information there at all costs. Blah blah blah. He puts up a good fight, but the numbers catch up to him, and so he's brought before the Fire Lord, which is revealed to be, well, they don't name him, but obviously it's revealed to be Fire Lord Sozin, because, oh God, I'm sorry, I really need to get like a tripod or something. But so it turns out to be Fire Lord Sozin, and he's like basically like, in like Mulan, where it's like now all of China knows you're here, or whatever he says in Mulan. And he's like, good. Then they won't know who we're really after. He's like, wait, so the Earth Kingdom isn't your target? And then obviously it cuts away to the air nomads. So apparently we get to see. Let me just change up here. Apparently we. Oh, that's a little bit better lighting too. Anyway, apparently we get to see the slaughter of the air nomads, which I didn't really. I could have gone without, but sure, why not? I mean, we already knew what happened there. Anyone who's ever watched the live action, not the animated. Sorry, like I said, uncorking my head. But anyone who's seen the animated, we know what happens to the monks. And they show basically what happens in a flashback. They just put into like beginning events, I guess, which I don't know. I guess that makes sense now that I think about it, because it's like, sure, that's technically where it starts as a whole, the origin of it all. But yeah, so I'm not a fan of the fact that they straight up told Aang that he's the Avatar. Like, I liked it better in the animated version, where he kind of just eavesdrops and he overhears, and that they're planning on sending him away, not Gyatso just being like, yeah, they're sending you away. But whatever, I guess that's a minute detail, sort of. No. I will say though, the bending and the visuals, they're spot on. They do look fantastic. I will concede that point. It looks like they did kind of just reach into the animated series and pull it into the live action. So they get points for that. But yeah, anyway, so after Gyatso tells him this, he ends up running away. And then we see the Fire Nation coming. Basically like Anakin, who's walking in to kill all the younglings and the Jedi Temple. And so everyone gets slaughtered. We see Aang. Sorry, I probably caught that on the mic. We see Aang, obviously flying on Appa. And he's caught in the storm. He's like, maybe we should go back. And so as he goes turn back, he gets hit by a huge wave. And then, boom, Avatar state. Big iceberg forms. He freezes himself. So then we cut to where it actually should start. And already I'm not a big fan. Like, this is more of comparison rather than, the fact that whether I'm enjoying it or not. But already I'm not a big fan. Because they start Katara off in a tent, and they just make her look absolutely pathetic and weak. They show her like in front of like a pail of water or just like a little hole in the ice or whatever, trying to bend water, and all she can do is get bubbles. All she can do is get bubbles. Whereas, when it first started off in the original, we're going back to the animated, it just starts off with them in a boat, and she's able to have a fish. She's able to catch a fish in a water bubble. She's able to lift the fish out of water, in a water bubble. And so it's like, what? So now she's just pathetic and stupid, and she can't, like, put that aside, yeah. So, there's that. She goes out, or whatever, and Sokka's talking to all the other kids in the village, because obviously all the adults went off to fight the Fire Nation. But then that's when we get to the actual scene, where they get into the canoe, and again, this is where it kind of it falls off a cliff. It falls off a cliff. It falls off a cliff, ladies and gentlemen. It falls off a cliff. Right from the start, in my opinion. It's just mainly because of the comparison. If the other Avatar, if the animated series wasn't there, sure, it'd be cool, it'd be great. But I'm sorry, but the animated series does exist, so you lose. So what ends up happening is they're in the boat, right? Oh yeah, that's another thing. They're in a boat. Oh wait, no, she's paddling. That's right, she's paddling. Right, she ends up paddling. They see the fish in the water because they're out hunting on the boat, the canoe, and so he's like paddle, blah blah blah. So she's paddling, and then they get caught in like some kind of like rip current or whatever, and they get out of control into this ice crevice, whatever. To which, they hit the ice, they fall out of the boat starts drifting away from them. Cool. Then they're on the iceberg. They're on the iceberg, and they don't see that Aang's inside, which is the exact opposite. Okay, and again, they take another big moment away from Katara, and they also start the premise of just shitting over all of Katara and Aang's romance, relationship building, and bonding. Because, somehow, it's not Katara that shows off her big strength and her big, the power that's inside of her by freeing Aang from the iceberg. Aang just fucking... I apologize for the swear, but Aang just friggin' bursts out himself. He just bursts out himself. Apparently he could have done that the entire time. So instead of, Sokka being like, leave it to a girl to screw things up, and Katara flying into a wild rage to where it showcases the power that's inside of her, they just have Aang blow out of it. And instead of him, fainting and being caught by Katara, nah, he just faints and slides down at their feet. You know how the start of it where he falls into her arms and he's all groggy because obviously he's been iced for 100 years, and then he opens his eyes and he's like, oh, he's looking at her, he's thinking, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. He's got that in his eyes. You could see it on his face, even though it's the animated cartoon. No, he just falls at their feet. Cool. Okay, sure. Why not? I'm sure they won't trample all over Aang and Katara's relationship throughout the proceedings. At all. But obviously also this, the light shoots off in the iceberg. As he's freed himself, which cuts us to Zuko, his ship, and Iroh. And again, the scenery looks great. I will say, I think, this is a bit probably nitpicky, but I think that Zuko's scar needs to be a bit more prominent. Because it's like a very small thing, just covering his eye over here. The animated series, it like covers up to his ear. And I get it, that may not be visually appealing, but it's a scar. It's not supposed to be visually appealing. Like, you think... Hold on. You think real life is going to give a crap whether that's appealing or not? the scar on my arm. The scar on my arm. You think real life is going to give a crap if the scar looks appealing? Because it doesn't. It doesn't. But again, that just might be a nitpick in my, my opinion, my personal opinion. But still, like, I think it needs to be a bit more prominent. But anyway, so yeah, he's all giddy because he's like, oh, that has to be the Avatar. So they sail in that direction, and they end up finding the village. And unfortunately, they take away one of Sokka's funniest moments, to where they know that they're coming. And, he rounds up all the kids, and he's like, all right, men, this is the day that you've been preparing your entire lives for. Blah, blah, blah. Man the walls, watch it. And he's like, but I got it. And he goes, and no potty breaks. They take that completely out. We fast forward, and Zuko gets there. And he's like, there's no sense in all of you dying. First of all, he seems very compassionate. And I'm not the hugest fan of that. I think that's really... He's not as ruthless as he once was in the animated. Because he seems very compassionate. He seems like, okay. I know in the original, he's like, he tells them, just give up the Avatar and we'll leave. But like, throughout the series, he seems way too compassionate, too different from his actual character. Because, like, okay, so then Sokka's like, no, just, why don't we do it leader to leader? And so he's like, okay, accepts. And so that makes sense, And Zuko starts kicking his butt, obviously. Because Sokka's not the warrior that he thinks he is yet. And then Aang steps in, obviously. And so they threaten the village, and so Aang surrenders. They take him to the ship. To where, I don't remember if this is what happened in the actual thing. Because this is, I guess, somewhat of a minor detail or whatnot. But it kind of sets the tone of who Iroh is. But Aang and Iroh, for some reason, have a chat when he's in on the ship in that cell. And then Iroh leaves. And the key is just left in the same room on the table in front of Aang. It's very stupid, realistically, to have just left the key in front of the prisoner in the same room. But also, I'm pretty sure that in the animated series, because again, we're doing the comparison things. In the animated series, Aang airbends the key off of a prisoner, off of one of the Fire Nation soldiers' belts. And instead of doing that, no, we just leave the key stupidly in front. So we're showcasing the incompetence there by just leaving the key in front of Aang, who they know is an airbender, who they know is a bender, period. I don't know why you would leave the key in front of a bender. I wouldn't even leave the key in front of a established warrior, let alone a bender. So he just airbends the key to him off the table. Okay, cool. He finds Zuko's room of obsession where he's, got all that, like, detective type stuff where everything's on the wall, and, sees he's been tracking him for 3 years. He reads Zuko's diary, and then that's when he makes his escape. Okay, cool. So he's making his escape. Someone eventually sees him, so they try to stop him, obviously. And he's making them all look like fools because, obviously, he's good at airbending. He's a squirrely, slippery avatar. And that's when they finally come. Oh, yeah, that's also true. I'm a little bit annoyed as well. Because while maybe it's a minor detail, Sorry, my hair's in my face. Maybe it's a minor detail, but you know that whole scene where they decide to go to save Aang, and they're like, okay, how do we catch them? And then they're like, oh, sky bison. And then they have to try and figure out his command word. Nowhere on camera did Katara and Sokka ever hear Aang say yip yip. But then, when they decide to save him, and then they're like, oh yeah, we can take an alternate, traveling way of transportation, the bison, and it just cuts to them immediately flying away. And I'm like, how did they know the trigger? How did they know his command word? Aang never said it in front of them. How do they know the command word? And again, maybe that's a minor detail, but in the animated series, they had it in there. They're like, what did that kid say again? And they go through a bunch of different things before they finally accidentally say yip yip, and he goes taking off. But okay, sure. Why not? Oh yeah, he also has the bison whistle already, which is cool. But they do kind of make a smart justification of to why he has the bison whistle. But anyways, yeah. So we go back to him escaping on the ship, and that's when obviously you see them coming in on Appa, which Appa does look great. I will say that. But yeah, they come in. And Sokka, they make it like a near getaway. Aang travels up to him on his glider. That's right. And they're shooting fireballs at him. He's dodging they shoot multiple fireballs at him at once, okay? And he dodges all of them. But then Zuko shoots one fireball. And for some reason, he doesn't dodge it, despite the fact that he's looking back, knowing it's coming, and he's just dodged all these other fireballs. He can't dodge that singular one. But sure, why not? Because it is Zuko, so it's like, it's the big bad so far. Sure, why not? Why make it, maybe his was traveling faster or whatnot, or he just couldn't, who knows. But it hits Aang, and it knocks him... it knocks him basically out of his glider. To which, he then, Sokka grabs him. And so they're dangling from Appa. And then Zuko is like, oh no, they're getting away. So he's visibly angry, which he did a good job. I will say that. The desperation and the look of anger at the fact that he was getting away. And again, the desperation, he's like, no, he can't get away. I need this. It said it in his face. And so he, last gasp, shoots another fireball at him or whatever. And to which, in the anime, it's not a big deal, but in the animated series, right? The animated series, I'm pretty sure Aang was the one that jumps off Appa and deflects the fireball with his staff, right? That's not what happens here. And also just for the fact that, despite at the very beginning of this same episode, Katara couldn't even lift water bubbles out of the water. She somehow manages to rise probably like a 20-foot water, like a waterfall basically. A reverse waterfall, let's call it that, a reverse waterfall. She somehow pulls water like 20 feet from the air up to deflect Zuko's fireball. Despite the fact that at the beginning of the episode she couldn't even get water bubbles, Okay, cool. That makes sense. Sure. A little late to be trying to showcase, she's got power inside of her. You could have done that by her getting angry and exploding the iceberg and freeing Aang. Because that's another thing, too. Aang just miraculously frees himself. It shouldn't be like the iceberg was melting. They're in a frozen tundra. There's ice icy water all around them. And snow. But okay, sure. Aang just randomly frees himself or something happens, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I know, I'm sorry. I don't mean to go back like that, but whatever. Anyways, yeah. So then next they go to the air temple. Okay, so we're skipping ahead a bit from the animated series. Cool. On their way to the air temple, I believe it's on Appa that she finds out that she has the waterbending scroll. You know, from the same episode where Aang would originally get the bison whistle. And it turns out that Gran had it, and she just kept it from Katara because they were looking for waterbenders. And while this kind of just does piss away an entire episode, I understand, right? Because they're a waterbending tribe, right? I mean, despite the fact that the waterbenders have either since left or been killed, they're still a waterbending tribe. So it makes sense that, you know, a waterbending tribe would have a waterbending scroll. So I was like, okay, you know what? I can live with that. That change makes sense. Because again, waterbending tribe, waterbending scroll, of course they would have a waterbending scroll as like a, you know, a lesson to teach other waterbenders. It makes sense. So I'm like, okay, cool. They get to the air temple. Sorry, my hair. So they get to the air temple. And it's not really the fun experience that they kind of had when they were originally there in the animated series. You know, it's a very sad moment already because, obviously, because they already told them, like, oh, the avatars, the airbenders have been wiped out, blah, blah, blah. They already told them that, which I guess that would make sense. And so he goes, not a whole heck of a lot happens. They just end up throughout the whole entire, you know, segment there, he just ends up finding Gyatso. And obviously that sends him into the Avatar state like it did in the animated series. Except, you know when I said that they, you know, I'm sure that this didn't mean that they were just gonna piss all over Katara and Aang's relationship and their building, right? Yeah, no. So he goes into the Avatar state, and it does look great, I will say that. But he goes into the Avatar state, you know, he's causing massive destruction. He's blowing Sokka and Katara practically off the cliffside. And so, you know, like in the other one, they're holding on to something. And my biggest issue with this series so far is the fact that they're just crapping all over Aang and Katara's relationship. Because that's what we wanted, you know. That was the premise set. Like, we wanted them so badly to get together at the end, and it's just non-existent at this point. So, in the original, when he's in the Avatar state, Katara talks him down. Katara talks him out of the Avatar state. Katara calms him down out of the Avatar state. That's not what happens here. He's blowing both Sokka and Katara off the cliffside, and she's just like, Aang! And it's a memory of Gyatso talking to him that ends up calming him down. So already, again, we're just pissing away the development of their relationship and their bonds, and just their all-around familia bonds. I think that was just Spanish, and it wasn't exactly the right. I almost said familiar, but no. Familiar bonds, you know. Because, you know, in the original, she's like, Aang, I know you're upset, and I know it hurts, but you're not alone. You know, I know Gyatso was your friend. I know he was your family, but you're not alone. You know, you have Sokka and I. We're your family. And but no. No, let's piss all over their relationship even more. Let's piss over all their bonding even more. Okay, so anyways, yeah, he calms down. And they're like, oh my god, that was so terrifying. So after that, they're just about to wrap up the segment, right? And that's when they come across, in the bag, you see the satchel moving around. And Aang sees it, and he's like, I think there's something wrong with your satchel or whatever. Basically, like, oh my god, the satchel is sick. The satchel has an upset tummy. And so that, they obviously end up seeing what's up. Momo flies out, or should we just say the flying lemur at this point. And he's like, oh, it's a lemur. There used to be so many around. And so obviously they end up taking him. Momo looks great. My one caveat to Momo is the fact that sometimes they make him sound like he's a chimpanzee. And I'm like, why? Why? But yeah, anyway, so yeah. They get him, and then he builds a monument to Gyatso, places Gyatso's necklace on the pile of rocks, or like nice dirt mound or whatever. Like basically it's a burial. It's a burial. I don't know where they got the shovels, so I don't know. But yeah, it's a burial. And then they set off. And then so he's like, I think I'll call you Momo. And he's like, Momo? Sokka. Sokka's like, Momo? He's like, yeah, he looks like a Momo. Just like you look like a Sokka. Okay, cool. And then so now they're off to Kyoshi Island, I believe. They're off to Kyoshi Island. I'm like, cool, okay. Kyoshi, I love me some Kyoshi. Love me Kyoshi warriors. Suki. All that. And also during this time, Zuko and Iroh go and they get to this harbor, and he's like, why are we here? And he's like, oh, they're, Admiral Zhao, they meet Admiral Zhao here. And I will say this, again, they're great with their visuals and their outfits, the bending effects. Zhao is no different. Zhao looks great. My one small, minute detail is I wasn't a fan of his voice, right? And that's not to say, oh, I think the actor has a shitty voice. It's just, when I picture Zhao, I picture hearing a very grizzled voice. Like in the animated series. But I'm like, okay, that's a detail we can overlook. He looks great otherwise. And so, yeah. So they go, because they're looking for information of where Aang might go next or whatever. But they don't want to tell him because the more people who know about the Avatar, the more people are going to be hunting the Avatar. And Zuko needs the Avatar to get home. So they make up some story about some like octopus type creature or whatever. About, oh, do you know where they're migrating? Do you know where you can, if there's any sightings around here or whatever? I don't know how that would tell them whereabouts of the Avatar, but sure, why not? To which Admiral Zhao is immediately like, something's fishy here. And that's when we find out, oh, there's someone who finked on Zuko's ship. Someone told one of Admiral Zhao's guys that, oh, they saw the Avatar, blah, blah, blah. So, he obviously writes to the Fire Nation, and he goes, he ends up finding out that, oh, there's been a sighting at Kyoshi Island. So, okay, cool. They start to head to Kyoshi Island. But Aang's already at Kyoshi Island. And they look at this big giant statue of Kyoshi. And I understand why they did it like this, because budget and whatnot, it probably would have been super expensive to like put in giant elephant koi fish and a giant, unagi. Even though unagi is a big part of protecting Kyoshi Island, that was one of its big purposes. Is the unagi protected? It's a sacred beast that protects the island. But sure, now it's just we've kept to ourselves from the outside worlds. We become Canada. We just take care of our own whatnot. Blah 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 blah. So not like Canada, but like Canada and Switzerland. We don't fight. We just protect our island, pretty much. And so yeah. I'm not a fan of the fact of the way they got him. Before, in the animated series, it was awesome. It was cool. They caught him off guard, caught him by surprise, and blindfolded and tied them up before they even knew what hit them. In this one, no, they just come out of like the brush and whatnot in just an ambush, and they already see them. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think that kind of takes away from everything of that. And yeah, they also take away Sokka's character development, which also annoys me, because how before he had this outlook, and he's like, let's dive into it. Let's like when they find out who has captured them, he's like, there's no way a bunch of girls took us out. And they gutted that. They cut it right at the legs. They didn't even, because that was an important detail for Sokka. It's not like, we wanted to see a sexist asshole. It's the fact that it's an important detail. It's an important growth for Sokka to be this way. Because when he, comes face to that, no, not a bunch of girls took us out. There's no way. We have the Avatar Katara's a waterbender, and I'm a big, strong warrior. There's no way a bunch of girls caught us off guard like that, To which then, throughout the episode, he starts to humble himself to the point where he's like, okay, she's a warrior. Suki, I'm talking about. Suki's a warrior, and she's a very great warrior. And she's got a great, warrior team. She's trained very good warriors, And so he humbles himself and he's like, okay, I need you to teach me, please. I know I have much to learn and whatnot, to where that's where he grows. That's where the relationship blossoms. And of course it would have been kind of funny and nice to see, Sokka dressed up as a Kyoshi warrior like they did in the animated series, but no. They just get straight to training by the time that point comes. Cool. Throughout the episode, there's like a bunch of sexual tension between him and Suki. Cool. Suki seems like this weird, awkward girl who's just always sneaking up on Sokka, which does make for some hilarious, little cute, funny moments where he's like, someone needs to put a bell on you. And then by like the second or third time, he's like, seriously, you should think about that bell. And so that's, I got a kick out of that. That, sure, why not? That's cute. That's funny, whatnot. But yeah, she just seems like an awkward, weird person because she's just always sneaking up and just staring and then saying a bit. And also, by the time the episode finishes, we already see Suki's face. Which I'm like, I think, no, I don't like the fact that they showed her face so soon. Because that was another thing. It was like the whole mystique about her is we never saw her face until like later in the series. But no, we get it right away. Sure. And also, they don't have for some reason, they took away the guy, the elder guy of the village, and they just replaced it with just an old woman who turns out to be Suki's mother. Okay, so Yeah, anyways, continuing from that, you know, turns out that it's Suki's mom. That guy, that elder guy, is no longer there. It's her. She's the elder woman. Okay, cool. Why not? Nothing really happens in much in that episode. I hate to say it, but not. If we're really not a whole heck of a lot happens. At least from my standpoint. Things of note is like, oh, can we look at your archives? Maybe there's some information there. Maybe Kiyoshi left something. Maybe we could find out more about, what this whole Avatar thing's about. So Aang and Katara go off to like the archives, looking through the stuff. They don't find a whole heck of a lot. Until Katara's like, oh, look, this says that the Avatar is connected to all of his, his past lives. All of your like ancestors or whatever, are you're the embodiment of them. So yeah. So they're like, okay, let's go to Kiyoshi's statue, commune with her. By this point, when they go back to Zuko and Uncle, they're like, oh, where's Zhao's ship? It's gone. And then some street merchant that they encountered beforehand was like, oh, you heard something about a flying cow headed toward Kyoshi Island? They're like, what? And they're like, oh, shit. That's the Avatar. So they go set off towards the island as well. They get there, and he's like, look, he's already there. It's too late. And he's like, perhaps it's not always about who gets there first, but where you look or whatever. Basically telling him, oh, he probably hasn't found him yet. And if you look right, where there might be one Avatar, there will be two. And then so it pans off to Kyoshi statue in the distance because Aang is now communing with Kyoshi. He's in like that Avatar spirit world meditation state thing where he's talking to himself. And weirdly, Kyoshi, they kind of undersell it because they're like, oh, you have the power of all your past lives within you. You have the strength of every Avatar that's come before you. She's like, you have the strength of 100 benders. I think that kind of undersells it. Because the Avatar is not just like an ordinary bender. The Avatar is the Avatar. So it's like, no, he's got... this isn't Hercules where he's got like the strength of 10 men. No, he's got like the strength of 100 avatars. Not just benders, avatars. So I'm like, but sure, why not? And then he asks something like, oh, what if I have to hurt somebody or something like that? And I'm like, oh... my boy, Kyoshi is not the one that you want to ask that to. To which Kyoshi just kind of just flies into this rage. She's like, and how many people have died because you weren't there? Because you ran away 100 years ago, pretty much. She's like, you have to do what you must. Your duty as the Avatar comes before everything else, Because Kyoshi's not a straight. She'll straight up kill a fool. She that's her origin. She kills the fools. She kills the fools. She does. She's got no qualms about that. So yeah. So that ends up basically wrapping up. As this is happening, again, this is kind of where they show Zuko is a bit way too compassionate because Katara sees him coming because they're on like a elevated area in the woods, and so she sees him coming up the hill. He notices her. They lock eyes, and then when they finally encounter each other, he's like, I don't want to hurt you. I'm not here to fight you. I'm after the Avatar. I'm like, what? Because that's another thing apparently too. For some reason, Zuko is very caring, considerate, and he cares about doing the right thing the right way. At least that's what it gave off to me. Because there's other examples throughout the show. Just like when they meet June as a mercenary, he's like, that's not the way Dad would do it. First of all, 'cause some reason he thinks highly of his dad all of a sudden. But also he's like, that's not the honorable way to do things. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, he does. No, Zuko doesn't care about doing the right thing. Zuko doesn't care about the honorable way. He doesn't care about the only honor that he cares about is restoring his honor and his path to the line of succession. That's what he cares about. You know why? Because he got in trouble for doing the right thing. When they had that war meeting, when he was still Prince of the Fire Nation, and he was invited to that meeting, and they were talking about how they were going to just sacrifice a bunch of new recruits. And he speaks out, and he's like, how can you just throw their lives away like that? Blah, 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 blah. That was the right thing to do. But what happened? His father punished him. His father ended up facing him in an Agni Kai, which is basically just a duel firefight, blah, blah, blah. And he burned his face, and then he banished him. So Zuko doesn't give a crap about the right thing. The right thing is what got him punished. The right thing, he thinks, that right thing that he thought that he was doing, he now thinks is wrong that he did that because he got punished for it. So he doesn't care about this honorable, all right way of doing things. No, he just wants the Avatar, and he wants him bad, and he'll do anything to get him. Which is where I get kind of annoyed, where it's like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. It's like, no, you don't care. If she stands in your... Sure, maybe you'll give her, maybe one chance. But if she stands in your way, no, you don't think twice. Because you don't care. All you care about right now is restoring your honor, is getting the Avatar, getting home, getting your father's love, which is another weird thing, because all the scenes with Ozai so far, he speaks highly of Zuko. Granted, most of the time it's in front of Azula, so who knows, maybe it's some kind of just a manipulation tactic on his part. Because, in the original, Ozai was not good to Zuko. He was not. For God's sake, he was planning on killing him. He didn't think twice about it. But that's another thing. That's a story for a different time. Anyways, yeah, so that happens. Ultimately, obviously, they end up getting away. The Kyoshi warriors and stuff fight the Fire Nation and whatnot. And yeah, so they end up running away. And the next, where are they going? They're Omashu. Omashu, I believe, is the next stop in this. So far, awesome looking, but kind of terribly written TV show. So, we all know how they originally got into Omashu. They, Appa was shedding, and so they used his fur as, a beard and wig, and Aang pretended to be Pippin Pappin Opsicopoulos the Third, and they pretended to be his Katara and Sokka pretended to be his grandkids. Nope, that's not what happened this time. They meet this random stranger on a wagon. Aang hides in the wagon, I guess, somewhere. Sokka's in the back of the wagon. Katara's riding with the guy. And apparently he delivers to Omashu, like food, crop, or whatever. And he's like, oh, sorry, my load's a bit light this time. She said that the crops needed more water, and turns out I should have listened to my wife. Am I right? No, it turns out my wife was right, or whatever. And so now, okay, cool. So they're still scamming their way in, and Katara just belts out, irrigation. Am I right? Okay, cool. So they get inside, because they also see a glider on their way in the skies on Appa. A glider in Omashu in the Earth Kingdom, where gliders are very specific to the Air Nation, the Air Temples. Don't know how they explain that, but sure. They don't explain that. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so they end up getting inside. They find the kid. It turns out it's the kid in the wheelchair from that one episode where they go to the other, like, southern air temple or whatever. And I'm like, what is he doing in Omashu? And then, obviously, for that to follow, his father, the Mechanist guy, who created all that stuff for the Fire Nation, the blimps and whatnot. He's there. I'm like, what? Okay, so we're just throwing away another episode. Oh, yeah, and it turns out that random guy that they met outside of Omashu, that was Jet. So they threw those two guys together. Okay, cool. Jet I could excuse, because it's like, sure, why not? He's a nomad type guy. He travels around. But it's like, the Mechanist, no. How do you can't, no. How do you don't even explain how you got the glider, which is, again, it's specific to the air temples. You're not gonna have an Earth Kingdom that has, like, gliders in it, like. But okay, cool, whatever, sure. It also kind of throws away that entire story, where that kind of was cool because it showed how Sokka was actually smart and mechanically intuitive and whatnot, and they come up with a plan to fight back the Fire Nation that are coming for the next delivery that the guy makes of, like, batch of weapons or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so cool. So, they keep Jet the same. He's still the angry, bitter murderer that he is. Because he doesn't care if innocent people get hurt. Okay, cool. So they keep that the same. By this time, Zuko's mad that Zhao, tried to be a douchebag and go after the Avatar. And he's like, I was just responding to a simple disturbance at Kyoshi Island. So they're bullshitting each other now. And yeah. Then they end up finding out, oh, he's in Omashu. So they're like, okay, we're going to send in, like, a guy or whatever as, like, a secret agent or whatever. They're like, nah, Zuko, me and Uncle will handle it. And he's like, are you sure? It's very dangerous. We won't be able to help you once you get in there. And he's like, oh. Iroh's like, yeah, me and Zuko, we're used to doing things alone. Blah, 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 blah. So they infiltrate Omashu. And a very redeeming quality of the show, at least in my opinion, Cabbage Merchant. The reveal of Cabbage Merchant, the original Cabbage Merchant from the series, is the live action Cabbage Merchant. And I think it's like when you first see them enter Omashu, he's like, hey, would you like to have some of my cat? And they cut him off. And then by the second time they cut him off, I'm like, let him say his fucking thing. But that comes later, because then they, Iroh's like, oh, remember, don't use your fire. But they end up getting Aang. Oh yeah, to tie in those two, Jet and Mechanist. Jet targets the Mechanist because he's like, oh, he's working for the Fire Nation. So he's got a plan, because the Mechanist has a special audience meeting or whatever, and so he's booby-trapped whatever, like, suitcase type thing the Mechanist is carrying, and he plans on having a fire arrow shot at it to have a big explosion and kill a bunch of people. Okay, so they stop that, obviously. And yeah, so that's that. Cool. And then Zuko and Iroh find Aang, and Iroh's like, remember, don't use your fire bending. We don't want them to come down on us. And he's like, don't worry, I'm not gonna need fire bending to beat this little kid. And so he's trying to fight him hand to hand. Aang, obviously not being a firebender, can use his bending, so he's just making Zuko look like a fool. At one point, they get to the marketplace, and he's dodging left and right and whatnot. And that's when Aang's like, why are you even after me? And that's when Zuko just, for no reason, doesn't tell him. He just goes, why? Because you're an enemy of the Fire Nation. He's like, really? He's like, you've been after me for 3 years, and that's the only reason why? To which Zuko's like, what? How did you know it's been 3 years? Unless. And essentially he gets pissed off because he realizes, oh, Aang read my diary. So he gets so super mad, uber mad, uses firebending, burns the cabbages. He hits the cabbage cart, and the cabbages catch fire. And finally, we got the my cabbages! To which I lose it because I'm like, yes! But yeah, so then obviously the guards come down on them because like, oh, there's a firebender here. And so Zuko gets beat up by some woman because he's like, how dare you hit that child? And so Aang starts running away. They obviously start to try and chase him, Zuko and Iroh. And the guards coming down on them. So Iroh is like, okay, get out of here. And Iroh holds them off. So he gets captured by the Omashu guards. Aang gets captured by the Omashu guards. Cool. They get thrown underground in their underground prison. To which then Katara and Sokka find out. And turns out there's a secret tunnel through the mountain. A secret tunnel. You know how I said I'm sure they're not going to piss on Aang and Katara's romance? Yeah, it's time to piss on Aang and Katara's romance again. Because now they head to the cave where those two lovers, but it's Sokka and Katara. And they still have the hippie guys, and the hippie guys do the secret tunnel song. Blah, blah, blah. And they go through the tunnel, even though all of them are supposed to go through the tunnel. The hippie guys stay behind. Cool. And they, again, piss all over Aang and Katara's romance, because now it's Sokka and Katara. And so they're going through the caves. They're lost. They finally, I think they drop a torch or whatever, or the light that they had goes out, and then they notice the crystals. So they're like, oh, it must be the crystals. They're like, what? They're all blah, blah, blah. They follow the crystals, and then it leads to a dead end. They're like, oh, it's a dead end, blah, blah, and then they go back, and they're like, oh, the caves are changing. And then, okay, cool. They meet the badger moles, and it's cool that they had the badger moles, but again, that was another big moment for Aang and Katara that they just, nah. Anyways, yeah. Then it turns out that, they're transferring Iroh to, I think, Ba Sing Se. And their transport, the guard is just an outright dick to Iroh. And then we find out later, oh, it's because his brother got killed in Ba Sing Se when Iroh attacked. When Iroh was laying siege to Ba Sing Se, so that's why he's being an outright dick to him for seemingly no reason, because he has a reason. Zuko, tricks a guard into telling him where, because he's dressed up as a guard, so he's like, oh, and then he's like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And he's like, oh, I'm late. I'm already in enough. He guilt trips the guard, because he's like, I'm already in trouble. Please, just tell me where the transport is. I need to go. I'm running late as it is, blah, 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 blah. And so he tells him, he guilt trips the guard. So he tells him, so he goes after Uncle. He saves Uncle. Okay, there, cool. There, that's done. Then we go to Aang. And he's brought before the king of Omashu. And right away, he tells him, he's like, I'm Boomy. And I'm like, no. No, you just ruined it. No. Because of course, why not? And so they but they end up throwing him a feast. And they have that line still in there. He's like, throw him a feast. And so they have the feast and whatnot. And at one point, Aang goes, you have to let me go. To which they have a forced reference. They forced the reference in there. That's the only way to describe it. They forced the reference. To where he has a piece of lettuce in his hand. He's like, let us leave? It's like, why? Just have Aang say, let us leave. And then you have Boomy have the lettuce and go, let us leave? Because otherwise it's just forced then. It's just forced then. He didn't say, let us leave. He said, you have to let me go. And first of all, there's no us. It's just Aang. So there's no us. There's no let us. So right there, it's like, God, why didn't you just keep it the same then? But then they have that, and they're like, oh, I have some games. You like games, right? Boomy is, for some reason, sadistic now all of a sudden. And he's given up hope and whatnot. And so he throws him in this cavern where the crystals, the crystals that were rings that they put on Sokka and Katara in the animated series. Yeah, it's just a cavern of crystals now. They rise up, they trap Aang for a bit. Aang uses airbending to get his way out, destroy the crystals and whatnot. Then Boomy comes in. He's like, what the heck, man? He's like, oh, maybe I just wanted to see the Avatar in action. Or maybe I just wanted to eat some rock candy. And so he eats the rock candy. I'm like, okay, that's funny, but still, could have just stuck with the regular version. And then it gets to the point, it's his final task now. His final task. And he's like, okay, now you have to fight me. And I'm like, oh, that also takes so much away. And also, no Flopsy. They didn't have Flopsy. I was honestly really hoping that there was going to be a Flopsy, but there is no Flopsy. Lovely. They pissed away the entire episode. And instead of Aang, having the choice, fight these, you have a choice, fight me or one of these two guys, and they're two imposing guys. And so he's like, you're an old man. So he's like, okay, I'll fight you. I choose you. He's like, wrong choice. And the big reveal that, he's actually a strong, fit, muscular old man who can do earthbending. No, it's just, hey, you have to fight me now. And that throws away Aang's last test to like, guess my name. I bet you don't know. Nah, they just fight. Boomy dominates. And he lifts two giant boulders basically over both of their heads. And he's like, you have to choose, basically, either kill yourself or kill me. Because I can't hold them up. He's refusing to help Aang. And then Katara and Sokka come in. They save the day. They're like, okay, now Aang. And so Aang just, stops bending and moves the things away. Okay, cool. Then they patch things up. And they do that laundry chute slide thing like they did in the animated series. And you see it zoom out and you hear the big crash and then you hear again, my cabbages! And I'm like, yes! So those were the highlights of the show, is the cabbage merchant being there. MVP in my opinion. Okay, cool. So then now they're going and they the next episode and they get to the burned out forest portion of the area. To which, again, here comes the reference. They find this little girl in the forest, in the burnt forest. She's all alone. She's got a doll. And Sokka's like, trying to be friendly with her because she's like, she's out all alone. We gotta help her. So he's like, you have like a doll in your hand. Does she have a name? And he's like, okay, well, how about we name her right now? And how about June Pipipapalopoulos the third? I'm like, really? Okay, just use the reference there and not just, you could have done it in Omashu. No, we're just going to do it here. Okay, cool, 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 cool. No doubt, no doubt. They get the girl back to her village, and her father's untrusting at first, but then she's like, I'm sorry. It's very stressful. A lot of people have gone missing lately, blah, 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 blah. So they're like, okay. So they're in the spirit world. So like, okay, so all I have to do is go to the spirit world, get the guys, get the villagers, and come back out. And so he does that. No. So like, oh, okay. So they go to the statue with the bear. They notice that it's injured. It's got like a scratch on its face. And he's like, okay, so I'm just going to meditate. You guys just watch over my body. Cool. Cool. He meditates. Then he goes into the spirit world. And then we find out, oh, apparently now the Avatar can pull other people into the spirit world with him. Because he's now brought Katara and Sokka in with him as well. I'm like, why the fuck not? So cool. They do that. They're walking through the spirit world. And then they come across this giant owl. Wan Chi Tong. The owl that's supposed to have a library in the desert, in the living world. Don't get me wrong. He's a spirit. But he has a physical presence in the real world, in the library of Wan Chi Tong. The library that has the knowledge of the entire world. So, I don't know. It seems like maybe we're not getting Wan Chi Tong's library in later in the series. Cool. And he seems to be all nice and helpful. He warns Aang, oh, it's dangerous here. Be careful. Blah, 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 blah. And then he flies off. Cool. Okay, cool. So they progress forward. And then Katara gets separated. And then she trips, whatever, falls. It seems like she gets transported back to the water tribe, the Southern Water Tribe. And it turns out she's reliving her past, the moment where the day her mom died. Her mom, they hear things, and so she's like, okay, come in the tent. She hides her in the tent. And then the Fire Nation comes in, Fire Nation guy, and he's like, where's the waterbender? I know you're hiding the waterbender here, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'll turn this tent over. And Katara goes to try and do water bending. There's a bucket of water. The bucket is just bubbling, blah, blah, blah. And then, the firebender is starting to notice this. Hair in my mouth. Sorry. I apologize. Hair in my mouth. The firebender is starting to notice, but then, a catapult goes off and hits something and it shakes around, the ground shakes around them, whatever, so throws off focus. And then her mom's like, wait, I'm the waterbender. And then they do, I don't know why they do it like this, but it's very stupid, and it gives the firebender justification for why he did what he did. So her mom just tells him that she's the waterbender. And then she goes, she moves as if she's about to do some bending. So, of course, the firebender, as a reflex, kills her instead. Because of course he would. Because she just told him, she just told him she's the waterbender. And she goes to do some bending at him. Why would he want to take the chance? Instead, they make him look like, they gave him some sympathy, basically. They make it look like, okay, he's got a good reason to have killed her. Granted, it's not really, but still, in that moment, it turned into a self-defense moment, because she became the offender. The offensive party, to where she goes to attack him. She makes it seem like she's about to attack him, so he kills her. Of course he does. I wouldn't risk. Someone just told me they're waterbender, and then they go to attack me. I'm not taking a chance. It's the Wild West here, people. You know, shoot first or die. So okay, cool. Rather than in the original where she's like, I'm the waterbender. Take me as prisoner. And he's no, because he's like, nah, I'm sorry, I'm not taking prisoners today, and he just outright kills her. That would have been better to do. Why? Because it makes him despicable, and he's the villain. He's supposed to be despicable. He's the bad guy. He's not supposed to have like a reason to have killed her. But okay, cool. So she freaks out, blah blah blah, and then it goes black, and then we see Ko's face, and that's cool. And you know, well, those of you who are fans of Star Trek, it turns out that George Takei plays Ko, the original Zulu. So that's cool. Oh my. Also, I skipped another portion where they go back to the fire. They pan back to the Fire Nation, and this is a group of people, and they're upset because they're like, oh, you know, our families have been killed, blah, blah, blah. And they have this girl. She's like, this girl, but she, you know, her family got killed by the Fire Nation or what have you, whatever. And so they're like, okay, so we do it tonight. They're planning an assassination, is what I'm trying to say. So they plan to do it tonight. And so they go to do it. Turns out they knew they were coming. Why? Because the little girl that seemed to be so relatable to them. Turns out that's Azula. Wasn't a fan at first because I'm like, she had the straight hair. I'm like, she looks way too innocent. And funny thing, the head of the would-be assassins, for anyone who's a Supernatural fan, the head of the would-be assassins was the guy who played Kevin Tran from Supernatural. That's also really cool. Unfortunately, it wasn't, you know, long lasted because he dies immediately. Cool, because the Fire Lord kills him and his friends. Okay. And that's when, again, he talks so highly of Zuko because Azula's about to walk away. And he's like, oh, your brother's doing great out there, you know, finding the Avatar and whatnot. And so she's mad. Blah, blah, blah. Big mad. Big sad. And so, yeah, they cut to her training with her teacher. And her teacher's like, okay, it's over. And she keeps going. He's like, what are you doing? I said it's over. And so she almost kills him. And then her friends Mai and Ty Lee come. Ty Lee's outfit's completely different. It's not as belly dancer-ish as it used to be. Which, sure, okay, cool, doesn't matter. It's a notable change. And May's there. And I have a little, I'm a bit on the fence about May. Because May seems like she's acting emotionless. Not actually, you know, glum like her character is, which kind of shows through when Azula takes her teacher down, because both Ty Lee and May freak out. They're surprised. There's definitely a look of shock, and they just come running over. When May probably wouldn't have, original May probably wouldn't have cared. Probably wouldn't have batted an eyelash, because May. But yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Anyways, yeah, so we'll go back, fast forward to the part where now it's Sokka. Sokka gets separated from Aang. He steps in a bunch of mud and he's like, more like Muddy Realm or whatever. Some cheesy one-liner type thing. And he bends down to, like, I don't know, tie his shoelace or something. And by the time he comes back up, oh, no, he's in the Water Tribe. Cool. And he's in front of his father, and his father's giving him the symbol of the wise for passing his ice dodging test. You know, the thing that he was supposed to do with Katara and Aang and Bato. But, okay, cool, we're just doing that now. And Sokka was like, but I had help. And Bato comes in, he's like, hey, you know, you did good. And he's like, we all need help from friends from time to time. So he's like, okay, it feels good. And so his dad's like, okay, go get your mother and your sister and, you know, your grandmother, and we'll celebrate. To which he goes to go out. And then he stops for some reason, and he sees his dad and Bato come out, and he's like, oh, he's disgusted with him. He's like, I can't believe how horrible that was, And Bato's like, hey, give him some slack. It was a tough, it was a tough course. Even I didn't see the icebergs coming up on us until it was there. And to which he's like, some people just don't seem to be fit to have people's lives in their hands. And so he's feeling bad because, his dad's shitting on him now. So he falls into like a pit of despair. Things go black for him. And then, boom, another Ko face. And then we go to Aang. Aang somehow finds him and immediately knows what to do because he kind of just gets literally emotionless. And he's, kind of plays out like the one in the series where he's like, oh, you know me? He's like, oh, yeah, I knew several of your past lives. And in fact, one of them almost killed me. And he's like, oh, someone tried to slay you? And he's like, yeah, something about stealing the face of someone that they loved. And his face turns to a woman's face. That's cool, blah, blah, blah. And then Aang disappears to Gyatso, and he's thinking it's fake for a bit, but Gyatso assures him that it's not. And it turns out it is the real Gyatso. It's just he's found him in the spirit world, and he tells them, "Oh, my friends are in trouble by Ko, and I need to save them." He's like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that, but perhaps one of your avatars who managed to beat Ko will know." And that is Roku. So now he's going to Roku on his own. Okay, cool. So yeah, that kind of wraps things up as to where I've left off. And I'm like, they find June in the town when they're looking for the answer for the avatar for Zuko and Iroh. They find June. Iroh is taken with her, obviously. And so there's that. Zuko mouths off. And Iroh's like, he didn't mean it, blah, blah, or whatever. And so she's like, okay. She's like, I'll let it go. But that's only because I think your father's cute. And then, by the end of their segment, Iroh's like, oh, I was watching the Pi show players here. They're very, interesting because they don't really know the standard rules, which makes them open to new possibilities. And then to which we start seeing someone walk out and come up on them. Oh, and it's June, because he also failed to mention that he broke away and also decided to employ her services to get Aang. How are they going to find Aang and track Aang? Don't know, because they don't have Katara's necklace, because that's how they tracked him before. But they're going to track him somehow. Okay, cool. So yeah, that kind of wraps all of that up. June looks great. Her mount looks great. I forgot exactly what it's called. And again, like everything else, it looks fantastic. We see the animal spirit of the forest. They captured that fantastically. It looks just like the one from the series. And yeah, that kind of leaves off there. Aang goes towards the fire temple to talk to Roku, and that's where I've left off. So here's the closing moments. I'm very on the fence about it, mainly because I keep comparing it. Mainly because I think that's what a lot of old fans wanted, is they just wanted a live action retelling of the animated series. That's not what we're getting here, obviously. I mean, we are, but we're not. It's very different. That aside, I will give them credit. I do like that they're showing that they're going to do more with Ko, because they just put Ko in there for like an episode in the animated series. I think that's kind of one thing that I can knock on the animated series. It's like they seemed like Ko was this big entity, but they did like one episode with him, and it wasn't even much. Okay, cool. So they're going to do more with Ko. That's great. But yeah, all in all, I think if you haven't seen the animated series, it's probably a very enjoyable experience. people who have seen the animated series, I'm sure they're very mixed feelings about it because, again, it looks fantastic, but there's just so much difference to it. And I think that's kind of what we're going to have to do. Like, I thought the same thing when Legend of Korra came out. I was like, this isn't Avatar. But then when I started looking at it, like, no, it's not Avatar. It's its own thing. I think that's what we're going to have to start doing with this new Avatar series, is approaching it like it's just its own thing, rather than just being like, oh, this isn't like the other one. Because yeah, I guess that's what's going to be. The comparison's going to kill us in our enjoyment of the series. Why not? But